Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, sponsored by the National Health Association. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and I'm very delighted today to have as my guests Jackie Norman and Gareth Scurr, who are kind of the driving force for really one of the very important global organizations for animal rights and animal protection called veganFTA for the animals. Jackie's got a long career as a journalist, and Gareth is a well-accomplished photographer and filmmaker, and they pool their resources to keep this thing afloat. And I just really want to welcome you guys. Hi, welcome. Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association, the oldest organization in the world championing the extraordinary benefits of a whole plant food diet and healthy lifestyle, as well as water-only fasting. We believe that health results from healthful living and focus on evidence-based science that promotes the health of you and your loved ones, as well as the health of all animals and the environment. We feature experts from a cross-section of disciplines within the plant nutrition, vegan, psychological, environmental, and animal compassion sectors. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, the NHA's Director of Health Education.
Thank you so much
for having us.
One of the nice things about doing this podcast is I get to meet people that I haven't known, which is really lovely, and get to know who are really doing really transformative work. And, you know, the work of animal rights and animal protection and spreading the vegan message is so important now just for the survival of everything. I mean, we can go into all of that. But Jackie, your story is kind of interesting because you got really turned on to vegetarianism kind of early in your teenage years based on experiences you had with vivisection and certain animal abuse stories that you had seen. And then, interestingly enough, you ended up on a journey into being a dairy farmer, and then that took you into all these other directions. Why don't you share that story a little bit with the viewers that we have who really don't know you and know your story? I think it's an incredible story.
Sure. Thank you. Well, I started off quite young as an animal rights activist, even though I didn't know back then that was what I was really doing. But as you say, you know, probably from about the age of around 9-10 years old, I became aware of issues like seal clubbing that was going along at that time in Canada. And I was quite appalled. And I was learning more and more about cruelty, deliberate cruelty to different species. And, you know, when I was growing up, there were a lot of meats, there were a lot of animals that I chose not to eat. And I never realized that people actually had a job in killing animals. I don't know, you know how we're taught that when we grow up that cows eat the grass and the grass makes the milk, and isn't it all magic? For me, it was like that with meat as well. I just figured that all the animals that I saw in the supermarket had just died of old age and had had a happy life. And well, that kind of made sense to eat them, right? So
they reach a certain age and they just fall into steaks.
Yeah,
and they just tip over, right? Okay, all right.
It's quite acceptable, you know. So although there were several animals that I chose not to eat because I didn't like the taste, you know, I thought that it was quite. That was how life was. And then as I got older, like I said, I learned about seal clubbing. And then once I got to high school, I learned about things like vivisection and factory farming. So I turned vegetarian at the age of 13. And yeah, all of my school projects were, and my presentations that I had to give, it was all about vivisection. I refused to take part in vivisection, animal dissections at school. And I kind of felt like a bit of a lone voice because all of my friends were learning this stuff at the same time as me, but they didn't seem to worry. You know, I was trying to pool all my little pennies, which I had, you know, very little pocket money together for cruelty-free cosmetics and all those things that are very important when you're 13 and 14, you know, and none of my friends were in that same sort of space. And so, you know, I kind of just did me for a while and spoke out when I could and was used to nobody listening. And then when I was 19, I ended up immigrating from the UK to New Zealand, which was very unexpected, quite spontaneous. And funny enough, I think one of the reasons that I never realized what I had arrived into when I started living with a family of dairy farmers was that I'd actually been lactose intolerant my whole life. So I'd never drunk milk or anything like that. And you know, I became quite indoctrinated, as would happen. You know, I was a very I was very proud to be a female in a male-dominated sphere. And at the time in the 1990s, farming was the future. That was the place to be. It provided security, pride in nourishing the world. And, you know, if you got a job on a farm, you were set for life. And so because I hadn't associated with animals, you know, I knew being vegetarian that an animal had to be killed in order for me to eat meat. So I didn't want to do that. But I never made the connection, crazy enough, between dairy industry and the harm that it caused, not just to the cows, but their babies. You know, I didn't see that until actually I was out of the industry and had become vegan, which, you know, the bottom kind of dropped out of my world then. But at that time, you know, I was very proud as a female of being able to milk these cows, and I was singing to them. I gave them names. I was petting them. And so I literally thought that I was doing no harm at all. So yeah, things are a bit different now, but that was how I started. And that's how I got.
Well, yeah, but you know, you're not alone. I think most people, because dairy farming or milk production and cheese and milk and all of that seems far disconnected from the killing machine that people think of when we look at animal torture and all of that. And they're so disconnected from the fact that, you know, like you did when you were, I loved your story that when you got involved with milking the cows, you were, you know, you were in this beautiful green environment and you were petting the cows and talking to them and, you know, looking at their relationships, and you felt so connected to them until the first calving season, when then you were really hit with the reality of what happens in the dairy industry. Can you speak to that? Because I know, and we'll come back to this, because I know you ended up making a movie about that. But I mean, that realization must have been so unbelievably traumatic when you went from this bucolic feeling of, oh my God, I'm one with the cows and we're just playing and I'm milking them and we're having fun and I've got a beautiful social network with my cow friends. And then you had to confront what many people don't confront or even think about. And I think it's important for them to hear that, because they do need to think about it. There's still too many people that think the dairy industry is this beautiful, clean, bucolic industry that, you know, doesn't harm animals. And it's a huge mistake.
Absolutely. My first year on the farm, I learned to milk the cows, but I didn't have anything to do with feeding the calves myself. So I learned a couple of strange things. Like I would see the men that were on the farm, and I thought it was really strange how, you know, the cows were, you know, across one side of the yard, and they were getting the milk taken out of them by machines. And then somebody else was taking that milk and feeding it artificially to the babies on the other side of the yard. And I thought, well, isn't that a bit weird? Like, the cow's right there. Why don't you just leave the cows with their babies? Wouldn't that just take the middleman out? And of course, at the time, I didn't realize that it was all about money. And it was around that time that I realized that, you know, cows eat grass, but grass just feeds the cows. It doesn't magically get transformed into milk. You know, a cow has to give birth just like humans do, and they carry these babies for 9 months. So that was the first thinking that I had in that first year. And the second year, we left that farm. My partner at the time, and we went to another farm, and I felt very capable. And it was at that time that I got involved in pretty much all of the day-to-day running of the farm. And that was when it was my job I had to feed 200 calves that year. Sometimes it was 400, depending what farm we were on. But that year it was 190, 200 calves. And I realized that there were two kinds of calves. There were the calves that were born, and, you know, just as all the media and in the, you know, the literature says, you know, they are taken from their mothers shortly after birth, which, you know, I hated doing and being a part of it. But strangely enough, I had that kind of disconnection still, because I knew that I loved these babies and I would take good care of them, and I would pet them and kiss them and feed them and play with them and all of that good stuff. And not making the connection is the absolute horrendous grief that the mother's cows went through. And being also in a male completely dominated environment, when the calves were crying, when they would bellow, I was told that they were hungry. And so I never even made the connection that they were crying for their mothers. It was like, oh, okay, well, you feed them and they shut up, you know, and that was what happened. They had full bellies. And so, you know, it was years after I left the industry that I realized that. But I did realize that there were two kinds of calves, and we had two sheds. And so the first were what you would call the replacements, and they were ones that would replace their mothers and grandmothers in the herd, you know, when they were no longer productive. And so they were the females that would take their places in the herd in a couple of years' time. And then you had what are called here in New Zealand the bobby calves, and they were called that because years ago that was their value. You know, people got a bob in Old English money terms for these calves, so they had very little monetary value put on them. It's a bit of a myth that, you know, all male calves that are born this way are slaughtered. There are still females as well. Sometimes, I think about 30% of bobby calves are actually females. And so sometimes they're the wrong color, they're the wrong breed, they're born too late. That's the usual kind of reason for having females in there, but I mean the literature is right as well. You know, it's very sort of dominated as well, that these male calves, nobody wants a heap of bulls because, you know, bulls are aggressive, you know, and we don't need them. They don't produce milk. They're not as useful, and so and usually at 4 days old they are sent. They're put on a truck. And they're taken to the slaughterhouse, and they're literally bred into existence to be killed. They are considered waste products. And in New Zealand, there's 2 million a year at the moment. So that is the reality. That was a bit of a wake up.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting. Most people, you know, when they have their pets, these pets have personality. They love them and so on. And in your writing, you know, you talk about the fact that, you know, people, when they're living in a non-vegan way, they don't see that these animals have their own personality, that these cows have their own relationships and groups, and they're looking after their young the way any mother would, and the connections of all that and the personalities that they have. And so, you know, to change that mindset, for people to really understand that all animals across all species have their personalities and their identities and their, you know, their own soul sentient quality that is being disconnected from the general mindset that, you know, that people then can use to love their pets, but decide to destroy and create these atrocities with these other animals. Now, I noticed that as you went through that experience then was what propelled you into being completely vegan at that point. That was really kind of a jump start into that mentality. And then from that, you said that there were some Facebook posts about the atrocities being done to pigs that kind of triggered you to go into another direction. And it wasn't long after that through the organization SAFE, that New Zealand animal rights group, that they wanted to kind of bring your experience as the dairy farmer and what you witnessed into making a movie. And I gather, Gareth, this is where you came into the picture too. You were involved in filming that movie, is that correct?
Yeah. Well, for the SAFE, it was just a short video. I assume by the movie you were referring to Milk, which was actually made by a friend of ours.
No, I'm talking about the short video though, about Jackie's experience of having these calves ripped away from their mothers. Yeah. I know you guys made a video, but it must, as small as it was impactful because you were fearing for your life. I mean, that whole story of you having to change your face, cover your face and distort your voice to be able to be in this video because of the powers that be around you, and you were receiving death threats. I mean, I just found that so remarkable. What was your life like during that time? It must have been brutal.
Well, for me, I didn't think we had anything to worry about because we were living on the road at that stage and living in a little camper van. And so we're sort of we're a small rural town. So we're looking out for pitchforks and flaming torches for being vegan. But for the most part, we had no address, no fixed abode, and so nobody could have really found us at the end of the day. But
he kept saying they've got to find you first. What are you worrying about?
Well, we can always just drive down the road and they won't find us anymore. But yeah,
Gareth, we talked about Jackie's experience. What brought you to the place of vegan consciousness? I mean, we heard that piece. How about your bit of a journey? How did that take you to where you got to?
Well, I've got to say, when Jackie first said about going vegan, I said, I love you and I support you, but there's no way in hell am I ever going vegan. Like, vegetarian was not on my radar. Right. I had been a sort of somebody who was idolizing sort of the homesteading lifestyle, to hunt it, catch it, eat it. That was the most pure thing and most masculine sort of thing.
Was that pretty much the mindset of like a chauvinistic New Zealand? I mean, was that part of that mindset? Yeah, is that something kind of ubiquitous for men across the board?
I do think so. Okay. Yes, and because I'm originally from Wales, and so I had a bit of that homesteading and like catching rabbits in the hills where I grew up. But I had no intention of going vegetarian, let alone vegan. But it only took sort of 5 days, and then Jackie was watching What the Health, And of course, we were living in this tiny little camper van. I was busy playing a game on my laptop while she was watching the film on hers. And so I'm busy killing things, and then I'm listening out one ear, and I just hear from What the Health. They're talking on the links between dairy, meat and dairy consumption and dementia. And right then in my life, my granddad had just sort of been diagnosed with dementia. And it just really hit the right note at the right time, because I just got me thinking, maybe this is a load of rubbish, maybe it is, I don't know. But if there's a chance that I'm not going to have to suffer through that myself later on in life, my family won't have to suffer through that, then maybe it's worth a try, giving up the meat and dairy and all the other stuff. And so that's what got me to sort of click a little health avenue to start looking into a plant-based diet. And it wasn't long after that, where we were staying at the time and where we shot the video actually originally was, it was a campground / working sheep farm. And so on that sheep farm, they had a couple of orphan lambs, and the caretaker there saw us and was like, "Oh, you guys have gone vegan now. You're a couple of soft touches. Here's a couple of lambs to look after." And we were feeding the orphaned ones, and it was Casper and Dudley, they were named. But they really got through to me, because as we were saying earlier about the whole connection with animals and understanding their personality, their individuality, the two lambs were brighter than our dog, I must say. A few more brain cells rattling around. It was beautiful to have that time and that connection with them. We'd go for a walk with the dog, the lambs would follow too. And even when we took Casper to a sanctuary, she was more well behaved than the dog in our van there,
and probably smarter than some of the people you knew too, I'm sure. I'm here with Jackie Norman and Gareth Scurr from Vegan FTA. We're going to take just a very short break to hear from our sponsor, the National Health Association. And now, to put a smile on the sponsors of the National Health Association, you're listening to the Health Science Podcast Show. I want to remind you to visit the National Health Association website, where you'll find incredible resources to support your healthy lifestyle, including plant-exclusive eating without added salt, oil, and sugar. Simply go to healthscience.org or nationalhealthassociation.org. Be sure to check out membership, which is $35 per year for those living within the U.S. and $55 for those living outside the U.S. You'll be amazed at all the information and benefits you'll receive. As a member, you're kept up to date on the latest evidence-based tools for health promotion. You'll receive the incomparable quarterly magazine Health Science, a beautiful 40-page advertising-free publication mailed to your home or offices, loaded with articles, recipes, inspirational stories, and interviews with world leaders in the fields of personal health, plant-based nutrition, water-only fasting, animal rights, and environmental support. And you'll receive details about life-changing events, such as the 2023 NHA Conference set for June 23 to the 25th, 2023 in Cleveland, Ohio, which will be the NHA's 75th annual NHA Conference. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and now back to the show. Welcome back to the Health Science Podcast. I'm Dr. Frank Sabatino, your host, and here with Jackie Norman and Gareth Scurr from the global organization Vegan FTA for the Animals. Jackie, we were talking about that short video that you made with Gareth where you got death threats and all of that, and I gathered through that the stress of that contributed to some of your own physical dysfunction at that point. Is that correct? I mean, I know you talked about the fact that you got ill a bit around that time. Was that something that contributed to all of that for you?
I don't think it helped. It certainly made me withdraw into myself for a while. I was just like, no, that's it. If this is the kind of thing, it's not worth me speaking out, And so, yeah, I'd been having some problems, some unexplained chronic pain. At the time, I didn't know it was chronic pain. It was just this awful burning pelvic pain, which we now know to be IBS, but at the time we didn't know. And so it was very debilitating. I also had a lot of sort of hormonal problems, various things, which I ended up having major surgery. I had endometriosis, adenomyosis, and all these nasties that, looking back, if we'd gone whole food plant-based from the start, I probably could have avoided, major surgery and that kind of thing. But at that time, yes, I was struggling with pain, and it was not long after I made that video, wasn't it, that I was bedridden for quite some time.
Yeah,
and so that's when you ended up being relatively housebound around that time for recovery and all of that treatment and all of that. I know you talked about being somewhat housebound.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was bedbound for 7 months before I even had the surgery.
And once again, this was living in a very small camper van. Now, when I say camper van, I don't mean one you can stand up in. It was like a small tradesman sort of van that we were living in.
Yeah, like a plumber's kind of van. It was 4.6 meters long and 1.6 meters wide. So
wow, that's true love. You know that, right? To be able to stay in that space together.
Loveful madness.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Jackie, from that point, I know that then you got influenced by some Facebook posts from Sarah Johnson and the people that were then really involved in really establishing the vegan FTA. Your experience as a previous dairy farmer became such a detriment at that time, but then you were sought after because you had been kind of a bridge into that world, and now what you had to say was a voice that people really wanted to hear, and your story became something that could be more widespread I'm assuming without those fears and attacks. Did that die down, or did that ever come back to haunt you and Gareth at all?
No, it never did, and it never has. And
That's
I think
great.
another thing that sort of gave me the impetus to keep speaking and write this way, the more as I went along and sharing things, and they were getting a good response, and people were saying, "Wow, this is really insightful," and I had no idea. I know a lot of them were pretty hard hitting, and they needed to be, but it was great to see people's reactions to that, to learning the reality. And I saw people at the time like activists such as Earthling Ed Winters, and Joey Carbstrong. I would see them on the street outreaching to people. I would see Ed lecturing in universities. And I thought, look at the way they're speaking and the way they just keep getting up there no matter what anybody says to them. They're not being shouted down. They just keep on talking. And I thought, if they can keep doing that, and, what's my excuse? With everything that I know, they haven't had the years of the industry that I have. They haven't had the experiences that I have. And yet they still keep doing that. And it doesn't deter them from being a voice for the animals. So, what's my excuse? And so that was a big catalyst as well, sort of seeing them in action as well.
I'm here with Jackie Norman and Gareth Scurr from Vegan FTA. Let the people know, again, from your words, where they can find you. What's the best place for them to go to follow you, to learn more about Vegan FTA? What is the website that you want to share with the audience?
So folks can head to veganfta.com, and that is our main website. But we are also on all social media platforms such as Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Just type in Vegan FTA and we should be coming up all over the place, spreading that vegan message.
And from that 100,000 plus that you had, I know now you're well over 700,000 in followers, which is fantastic.
More than that.
Yeah, 730 is what I read, but maybe it's probably even more now. I don't even know, but that's fantastic. And
I believe across the platforms we're at over 1.6 million now across platforms.
Oh, that's fantastic.
You're getting there.
No, but it's amazing because it's nice to know that people are really open and embracing that message. It's such an important message. Why don't you go through a little bit? Because I know you guys have, a mission statement, you have strategy. Go through a little bit of the vision and mission of what the organization is really about, so people that don't know you and this is their first exposure can really get a sense of what you stand for.
Well, Vegan FTA, we have two primary goals. And the first is to get people to go vegan in the first place. And second of all, is to get vegans to be active, to become activists. And so through our platform, we try and offer many learning resources for people so they can understand all the different forms and varieties of activism out there, whether it be writing, whether it be street outreach, art, music, whatever your personal talents and experiences are, you can bring them to the fore for activism, just as Jackie's doing with her dairy experience. And so we really want to be that hub where people can come to learn to be a true voice for the animals. And some of the ways that we do this as well is through collaboration. That's such a big core component of what we do, is working with other activists, organizations, people like yourself, who we are so honored to be on the show, but to work together to spread each other's message. Because when we're all on this ethical, compassionate movement, we can't build a vegan world alone. We need each other. One person doesn't make up the world. And so for us, it's so important to help amplify those other voices doing important work in our movement, because I'm not a great outreach speaker, but there's others who are, and they don't have the following. And so we use our following.
Collaboration is definitely the word for the new age, because there's no reason to try to reinvent the wheel. There are people that have certain skills and things, and other people have others. And when you bring it together, you become that much stronger. And I like the mentality that, you said being vegan is not enough. You've got to have that voice. And it brings to mind a phrase that was used even by Martin Luther King, where he said, our lives begin to end the day we stay silent about things that matter. This is something that, matters so much in the world of human intercourse, not only just the care of animals, because compassion for each other is tied into our compassion for creatures that, we are caretakers of. In the United States, there's an interesting thing in the criminal justice system, and the police and the FBI use it. It's called the link. And the link in the criminal justice system is that they know that people that abuse animals, even domestically in the home, are significantly more likely to create domestic violence on all levels. So the mentality of violence that we see, and that is so kind of ever present now, where you're seeing these random shootings and all of these things, it is so important to come back to any model that can support compassion, and especially for creatures that we have no right to really abuse, that they really have a right to be here as much as we do. They have a right to their own life and their right to thrive. And we need to take that banner up. With the kinds of programs you do, I'm assuming they're a number of different things. Tell me what they are. Are they courses? Are they podcasts? Are they videos? Well, give me an idea of all the things that you're putting together.
Well, currently a lot of what we do is video series and podcasts. And so the activist series is one of our main sort of flagships, where we interviewed activists from all around the world in different fields, different specialties, and really learn what the core is that got them to be active, how they conduct themselves, how to be a better activist in that field. And so everything we do, we try and put out there as much as possible free for everybody. So that's up on our YouTube, our Facebook channel. But we're also now expanding out into a lot of different series, where we're doing a vegans around the world collaboration at the moment with different activists, learning what it's like in different countries such as Argentina, India, so many different localities. But also a major thing that we do is sanctuaries, and collaborating with them to help get the animal ambassadors out in front of our audience and get people to learn the true stories of animals who have been in factory farming or other abusive systems, and see that, they can have a happy and joyous life. These sanctuary animals haven't taken over the world yet because they haven't been killed. They're just living a beautiful life. And so we do a lot of work with sanctuaries too, to really help people educate themselves about what a happy animal can truly be, what our world can look like if we stop breeding so many of these animals into existence just to slaughter, that they should be having the beautiful lives that, people get to see through our channel.
And connect with them as individuals as well. Like you were saying before, they are very individual and personalities, and it's their chance to shine. And so,
well, I spend a lot of time in the UK, and there's been really an explosion of veganism in the UK. Have you seen with your work that has actually spread through New Zealand? I know it was kind of a little standoffish about that in terms of the chauvinism and so on that we talked about. Is it expanding through New Zealand? Are you seeing that on a grassroots level becoming more widespread in your country?
I think it's expanding commercially, I would say. There's a lot more places willing to offer vegan options, and we're making some footsteps forward. It still is very difficult because New Zealand's primary industry is dairy. And there's so much also trophy hunting out here. There is a lot of that chauvinism and hunting that is really driving cruelty And so there are a lot of brilliant, and I'm so thankful to know them, brilliant advocates out here who are making a big impact. It's still just, it's a very uphill battle, but we are getting there. We're making traction. And the more that we come together and support other organizations, the more that we work together, the sooner we will be breaking through on this. And so I am optimistic for New Zealand. We just need to get rid of this clean green image that they've greenwashed and actually get New Zealand back to clean green. You know, it's only green because of the cow poo at the moment. So
what are the trophy animals in New Zealand? What are they?
It's mainly things like deer and goats, like the tahr species, but also there's things like elk, even wallabies, the small species of marsupial, all sorts of things like that. And
also fishes, you've got marlin, marlin, a big trophy, kingfish.
I see. So all of that.
I think a lot of people don't actually realize how big the New Zealand trophy hunting industry is. We did an interview with Eduardo Gonçalves of End Trophy Hunting in the UK. And doing that, we did all the research and we just pulled up all the stuff from New Zealand. I was like, wow, I didn't even realize that was happening on our back doorstep. And so, there's a lot for us to be working against. But luckily, we love fighting for animals. And so we'll keep us busy and hopefully we'll make some change in this field.
And this is not just a food issue. People need to realize there's like 140 million tons of animal byproducts for clothing and for, when we talk about vegan, I think sometimes people just, limit it to a food concept and they don't realize that it's also about the products you're buying, the things you're wearing. All of this is really part of this old ahimsa concept of do no harm, the harmlessness and the compassion. So I think people need to get right with the understanding that we don't need to have this kind of devastation on any level, not only for food, but for all of these ancillary products and things that are, being used in these industries. Jackie, I know that one of the things that was of interest to you is to move, and you've talked about it, I don't know if it's still of interest, but you talked about going into the realm of politics. And I saw that there was this animal justice party. Can you talk about what that is? Because I was unaware of that. Can you talk a little bit about that political piece?
Yeah, that was something that I never imagined to get into. But I was invited to, there's an animal justice party. Actually, we've got one in New Zealand now that is just formed, which is wonderful. But in Australia, the animal justice party is very strong. They've been making some great changes for animals. And Emma Hurst, the MP for the Animal Justice Party in New South Wales, she approached me back in 2020 and said, we are doing a parliamentary inquiry into the long-term sustainability of dairy farming in Australia, in New South Wales specifically, and we'd really love your input. We don't really have any insider knowledge or, apart from the farming lobby people that are all, pushing the government, we need more money kind of thing. So virtually I gave evidence in Parliament sharing my years of experience and insight, and it was great. Actually, it was a really kind of fun experience. I found it really daunting at first because there were like I said, there were everybody before me pretty much. There was a couple of members from the Vegan Society in Australia who spoke about why we shouldn't be giving the dairy industry more money. I mean, to give you an example, I think there was dairy farms in New South Wales had dropped by 50% that year. I think there was over 500 dairy farms that had to close because it's just not the right conditions for dairy farming over there. It's the weather extremes, just the land and everything. And so I was basically sort of saying, you want to know how not to do something, go follow New Zealand's example, just please don't put yourselves in that position. But it was great because all the farming lobbyists went first and they were pleading to the MPs, we need more money, And then I sort of come in at the end and talk about the experiences in New Zealand, the effect that it's had on our drinking water. A lot of our drinking water isn't safe. Our rivers are polluted. I think it's something like 2/3 of our native aquatic life is extinct now because the water pollution is so bad. And, our dairy industry is propped up by, is it $12 billion a year?
Yeah,
it's propped up by subsidies more than it earns. And so I sort of, I spilled all this stuff off at them, which was one thing. But then I actually was talking about, the separation of the cows and calves, the exploitation of females, their reproductive systems, and males are also exploited in the industry as well. The bulls are as well. And I think the one thing that really got to them, which I didn't mention before, it shames me now that I never made the connection as much when I was in the industry, but after taking cows and calves and separating them from each other, I actually, that one of those first years, the first year that I raised those 200 calves, I was actually pregnant and gave birth to a little boy who would be 28 tomorrow. He's got the same birthday as me. And
happy birthday, pre-birthday. Yes.
He unfortunately he passed away. He was born prematurely. He was 6 weeks early. So technically in this day and age, you kind of don't worry too much, but he had an infection called strep B, which was deadly to babies, and we didn't know that he had it. So he passed away at 2 days old. And what got through to those MPs, I think, and maybe even some of the farmer lobbyists as well, I was able to describe what it was like losing a child after carrying it, having my baby taken away. And for me, I had answers. I know that everybody else tried as much as they could to save my baby. I knew exactly what happened. And although it was it's not something you ever truly get over, I could make some kind of peace with it because I knew the outcome and I knew that everybody did the very, very best that they could and that some things just wasn't meant to be. But in the case of those cows who have carried their babies for 9 months, weren't asked to be impregnated in the first place, and have their babies taken away from them, not knowing if they're being slaughtered or not knowing if anyone's looking after them, not knowing anything about them forever. I don't even know if the cow has a daughter and she rejoins her mother in the herd 2 years later. I've no idea if they recognize each other. If I wouldn't have a clue, to be separated at a day old like that. Right. And so this was the kind of empathy that I was able to get through in Parliament to those MPs, what it is like and what we are putting these cows through year after year after year. And I think that was, we got through to somebody, because I remember the parliamentary office and the Animal Justice Party office came back to me in an email and said, some MPs went home that night and they went to their wives. I had no idea that any of this happened. And yet, despite all that, they still decided to give the dairy industry more money.
Well, of course, but I mean, our people in New Zealand, now that that's becoming a part of New Zealand too, would people actually run for election on that party? I mean, is it that kind of a thing? You would be someone who would come from that group to be running for parliament or whatever?
Yeah, it is a typical political party, and so we have electoral candidates, and so here in New Zealand, it's just starting up this year for the first time. And so we have hopefully a couple of candidates who will be... For
election 2023, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so we're really looking forward to giving animals a voice here in New Zealand.
Exciting, yeah. Jackie, in my own experience, I went through science and did research on a PhD level, and I still deal with some of the trauma of what I had to really do. And I think back, and being able to do the work that I did has helped. Has you moving forward with your activism helped you with kind of that post-traumatic stress that was part of the grief you experienced because of the kinds of things you saw as a dairy farmer? Has that helped you to process that a little bit better?
It has. You see me, don't you? So he has to live with me going through all that.
It's for me, watching Jackie as it's as if, the layers are finally coming off. They've been trapped, for so long. And now as we go through our activism journey, more and more breaks away. And I can see it in Jackie, as she's starting to relive some of these moments. I think it has been good. It seems to allow you to blossom again, and come back from that, because it is hugely traumatic. Just even one of the instances, are going through, but you've seen so much on the dairy farm. Who was it? Tilly, was it, who had 16 babies taken from her?
14. She was a 16-year-old cow. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're seeing trauma on a daily basis on the farm, and there's so much to unpack there. And so now seeing it, being peeled away, it's lovely to see, the Jackie who's inside coming back through now, with that compassion and really, making amends for everything that's happened, and you can never change what's happened in the past, but
there's an ongoing healing. I could feel that. That's a great thing. Jackie, what about this group that I saw you connected to, this Viva group, this leadership group of vegan women? Is that still in play? Are you still part of that? Or What kind of things?
Yes, it's had a change of name now recently this year. It is now Vegans in the Limelight. It is run by its wonderful founder of Vivas, yes, Katrina Fox. And that was wonderful. That has helped me no end, Katrina and the lovely ladies that I met there. It's no longer female exclusive, so I think that's another reason why it's had a change of name, you know, so it's now Vegans in the Limelight. And it is a wonderful, warm and welcoming community, and that really helped me to find my voice there and actually move away from just writing about my experiences to being able to talk about them. So that first year, Katrina got me a speaking role in, I think it was VegFest UK, the summer fest online that year. And I was really terrified doing that because, as before, you know, this time I was talking about my experience and then some, like I'd done in the safe video. But my face was no longer blurred, and, you know, my name was being put out there. So I was terrified. I lost a lot of sleep over that. But there was no comeback. All it was. Well,
that was a serious coming out party for sure. There's no question about that. You know, with everything that went before it. Amazing.
Absolutely.
Where do you see Vegan FTA going? Where would you like to see it go? Give me a little idea for, you know, what you see for the future for what you're doing, the work you're doing together.
Well, vegan world domination. Yeah. I would love that.
I'm on board with that. I'm cool with that. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
But no, we just really hope to keep on growing and working with more and more activists, organizations, and forming a stronger coalition, a stronger movement for the animals. Because every year that we're in this, we learn so much more about different struggles going on. And if we can continue to lend our voice to these plights, that will really fulfill us, and we will be so much happy and so proud if we can help make some change. And so 2023, we have a lot of campaigns in the works. We have moved more into actually campaigning this year. And so really trying to put our full weight behind stopping issues and hopefully moving into pressure campaigns to be as effective as possible and get as much of our audience in that same effectiveness, the same spirit of activism. And so, yeah, we just want to keep on growing. And I need to practice my evil laugh of vegan world domination, but you know, we want to keep on getting out there and getting the message for the animals.
Actually, not bad. You got it down pretty good. We're at a point now where people, you know, we're out of lockdowns and all of that. So has that been a benefit to be able to be out in public, in person, and doing things more that way again? I know you guys did a lot online, and Jackie, because you were even housebound, you were the poster girl for activism from a situation where, you know, you were housebound, which is remarkable in itself.
Bedtivism, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. Yes, I like that. Yeah, for sure. Before we break, do you have any final words of advice or words of wisdom or words of input to our audience?
Oh, I think just following on from what Gareth was saying, you know, we are vegan for the animals first and foremost, and we always will be. But, you know, being in the sphere that we are in, we are very much about amplifying, as Gareth said, the voices of others doing important work. And while we are vegan for the animals, we are, you know, it doesn't mean that we're shutting out health or environment and climate and all of that stuff, because we all need to be working together, because we all ultimately want the same goal. And there's just so much infighting and, oh, you don't do things my way. And we're just not about that at all.
We need a holistic movement, because
that's a great way of putting it. That's better than what I was saying.
If we save the animals,
that's what your collaboration model is about, because you're bringing in all of these different groups with their different insights, viewpoints, and you realize that there is no separation of animal compassion and animal rights and human health and environmental and planetary health. And, you know, when we present that model that way, all of these pieces fit together in this beautiful puzzle of enlightenment, I hope, for the future. So what you're doing is fantastic. I applaud you. I'm so happy we got a chance to get to meet each other, and that's great. And I encourage our audience to follow them online, to support these initiatives as much as you can. And I also want to really thank our audience for being with us, because without you, we couldn't do any of this. And on behalf of the National Health Association, I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. I want to thank you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Health Science Podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. You've been listening to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to evidence-based health science that backs a whole food, plant-exclusive lifestyle and contributes to the well-being of all people, animals, and our environment. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Be sure to leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next show.